Okay, I think we are good to go. Will you out there give a thumbs up if you're able to hear me properly and there's not any echoing?
Okay, I think we got it.
Okay, thank you, Steve from Jordan. Steve from Jordan, you might recognize a colleague here. We have Brooke Anderson, and we also have Holly Allen with me. They presented recently at USET, and I thought that their presentation would be very pertinent here. Before I hand the time over to them, I wanted to give you a few updates on what we're up to. I wanted to let you know about the agenda today. Originally, we were going to talk about records retention and expungement. We've changed that around. LEAs are asking much more about vetting educational applications, and so we put that on the agenda for today. We'll be talking about the metadata dictionary in depth on our next webinar, May 3rd. And right now, I'll give you that update later. So let's go to the next slide so we can get through these pretty quickly. I wanted to make you aware of a new website. It actually has the same information that was on the USBE one. We're hosting, UEN is hosting this site because USBE, a lot of acronyms. USBE is revising all of their web pages, making it very difficult to update it at this time. It's anticipated that that project will be done in June at USBE, but until then I need a place where I can upload documents as quickly as possible for your consumption. Some of those documents which have been requested to be uploaded today are the model documents here. We have model documents for data breach, prohibited activities, record retention, training, disclosure, and also employee data sharing confidentiality agreement. All of these are for your consumption. They're not, you'll see caveats at the top of them saying that they are certainly not perfect. They might not be a one-size-fits-all for your LEA, but we want to provide at least some guidance, starting jump-off point that you might find helpful. I'm also providing resources within these documents so that you can see what other states are doing. And that'll be up. I requested for those to be uploaded today. It might be up tomorrow, but I'm hoping by the end of the day. Also, very excited to have some positions available at the state level so that we can start producing materials and having trainings. And so there is a current posting for a student data privacy trainer. That person would work with me directly and would be essentially in charge of creating resources and materials at both the state but also at the LEA level. It'll be a fun position. It's something I would like to do. You can see the job posting number there. That closes April 13th. Also, pending full approval, although I think we're very close to approval, is an IT analyst position. Will be a web developer to help us with the metadata dictionary that we will be discussing on the next webinar. And then for the next fiscal year, of course, pending approval, we're hoping to have a data privacy officer or auditor starting in the next fiscal year for July 1st. And this person would certainly be an auditor within the state and LEAs, but I'm seeing this position and this role a little more leaning towards a trainer or someone to help with technical assistance. I say it's basically a trainer with a scary title. So, but that person, that posting, I'm hoping will go out in May. So there should be a lot more help in getting these out to you. I wanted to let you know of in preparation for the metadata dictionary, which we'll go into detail in a month or sooner if we're able to develop that faster, is we have decided to kill two birds with one stone, and here at the state we are having an audit of all of our contract MOUs, interagency agreements, master sharing agreements, and we're housing them together. We're cataloging them, and these are the column headings that we have in this expansive Excel
And I'm the most guilty of anyone, so it's like, oh, I better get my
that
butt
we
in
want to
gear.
share with you. So feel free to ignore or not. We're digitizing all of our contracts and agreements. We want to make sure that
Not miss a beat.
there is one place to find them all. And this is in preparation for the second bird, which is to go and find out to the data element level what is being shared with third-party vendors, with researchers, and that is phase 2, which will start in just a few weeks. The entry page for the metadata dictionary will be done this week, but we don't want to share it yet because inevitably there will be some kinks in the system that we want to work through over the next few weeks, and therefore that's why we're waiting about a month to give you that tool. We don't want to give that to you too soon. So I think that is my last slide. I'm going to turn the time over to Brooke and Holly and talk about something that's what I consider to be the biggest threat to
the biggest opportunity.
There it is, biggest opportunity. We'll have Brooke say the positive side of things. So, Brooke, it's all you.
Well, thank you, Whitney. Holly and I are very pleased to be here to be talking about vetting educational apps. We have a couple of objectives. We'd like you to be able to identify when an app is requiring PII, so you know what websites your teachers are using will require vetting and which won't. And also how to conduct a basic evaluation of an app's privacy policy or terms of service, what to look for. And also we want to make sure that you understand how the Student Data Privacy Act, how it intersects with your need to vet these apps and what's in there that we actually have to pay attention to. All right, so Holly, we'll turn it over to you to go over personally identifiable information.
I have one comment that was, by state statute, all districts have to have policy in place by July 1st. I'm not sure that some districts will be able to fully meet this. Agreed. It is a very, very heavy lift, and we understand that. And I think an auditor would say, keep going, keep working on it. So keep doing it. Yes, it is a heavy lift. We understand that.
So the most important aspect of why we're doing all of this is the personally identifiable information. Originally in the 1970s, when FERPA came out, that meant something different. It meant just names, family information, contact information, identification numbers, social security numbers. Anymore, we're looking at a whole lot more. We're looking at what's listed on the slide. Cookies, we wouldn't have thought of that before, even 10, 20 years ago, that now has personal identifiable information in it. All kinds of tracking data that websites use, that now counts as personal identifiable information. And so we have to be a lot more cautious. And in that way, this law is actually very timely. And it's coming at a point when companies are becoming more and more aware of their responsibilities to students, to younger children, to ensure that their data is kept safe. And this is a concern across the nation, not just here in Utah. There's several aspects of this that we can collect as LEAs, that we can collect our educators, our teachers, and there are aspects that we cannot. Most of us are aware that we are allowed to collect IEP information. It's not considered something that is within something we have to do by law, but because it is necessary for some of the federal programs that we're involved in, we do collect that. It just needs authorization. The same could be spoken of biometric data, data for federal or other programs. The information that we can't collect, however, is you cannot collect a student's social security number. You cannot collect their criminal record. As far as in the classroom, you can't ask them about those kinds of things. And you cannot ask about their parents' income. All of these things are considered to be forbidden by the law. And there's only a few exceptions with the criminal record relating to communicating with different officers. As far as the optional data that we do collect, and this includes, like I said, the IEP information, but it also includes the biometric data, it requires an optional authorization disclosure statement. This is different from the one that you have to have on your website that everyone's going to see. That is your data disclosure statement that says, here's everything we collect, here's what we do with it, here's where it goes, here's who has it, here's how we're protecting it. In addition, there needs to be a separate form that is filled out by the parent that says, yes, I'm aware that you're collecting this information from my student, and that I'm aware of what information is being collected, why it's being collected, what you're going to do with it, and what you're going to do when it's done. All of those need to be clarified within the document, and then you require a parent's signature for that. Biometric data, which does not include things like a recording of a student's voice, or a picture, or information on their weight or height. Any of that is not considered biometric data. Biometric data is only the listed items here. The retina or iris scan, fingerprint, biological samples, and then the scan of hand or face geometry, which is a little different from just a photograph. Photographs can be collected. Those are considered to be directory information. You'll see them in yearbooks. You'll see them with student name in the yearbook. And those companies don't do any assessment. They just produce these kinds of yearbooks, handouts at games, different things like that. But when you're collecting biometric data, and this is typically only going to be the case for classes that require a student to go work for someone else, or they're working in the preschool. Sometimes a biology class will collect biometric data if they're doing a DNA type of experiment. But most of the time, we're not collecting it except in these very rare exceptions. If you do, just like all of the other optional data, you require a form that is separate from the form that we have on our websites that's required by state law now. And this biometric data authorization is almost identical to the optional data. You still have to say what you're collecting, why you're collecting it, what you're going to do with it when it's done, and you have to ensure that this is kept safe. There are a lot of sort of rumors going around about what we do collect, and so we want 100% transparency so that parents are aware this is exactly what's going on, and all of these other things that are conjecture are not going on. The rules with aggregate data. These are extremely important for LEAs especially, but also at the teacher level. And so this is something that if you're working with educators and you're training educators, make sure that they're completely aware of what this means. Aggregate data are data that are collected, reported at a group or cohort level, but your numbers have to be over 10 in order for you to do this. And that includes subgroups. So if you're going to split it out and you say, I have a class of 25, and I'm going to report to the parents on my website that half of the ELL students passed the test and half didn't, and you only have 2, you can't report that at the aggregate level because that is identifiable. There's only 2 of them. Even if there's only 9 of them, you still can't do it. You can't split it into subgroups unless every subgroup is greater than 10. Otherwise, you're going to have to not report any subgroup that is smaller than that. No personally identifiable information should be included in aggregate data. And ensure that you're very sensitive to the fact that as you're reporting this, you're not including anything that anyone in the community could say, oh, I know who that is. That's the most important thing, that this student cannot be identified as, oh, Johnny next door failed. And this is where we get into apps. Apps include anything from a website. There's a whole list here. You can read it on the slide yourself. Most of the time we're dealing with website applications or applications that are mobile, but any software, anything that where you're working online with these with the student information, that's going to be considered an app. And these can be either internal or external. The internal are the ones that the LEA itself says, this is a program we're going to use. And so an example would be Skyward, Mastery Connect. We have quite a few that we use at the district level, and they're provided by the district or by the state. Teachers are not responsible for those because those are the responsibility 100% of the entity that is requiring it. External, however, are going to be general audience that your teachers are using a lot of times without telling you. They'll say, oh, I found this really great app. I want to do this with my class tomorrow. This looks great. I'm going to have them all sign in, get a login. And suddenly we're dealing with something where we could actually be breaking the law by having students signing in, creating a login and a password, and working on an app that maybe no one's even bothered to read the terms of agreement, or the teacher who has read the terms of agreement isn't aware of the law. And so these are the things that we're going to have to start being really careful with. These apps cannot do targeted advertising. They can do advertising that helps, that's just general. So if there happens to be an advertisement on there that's on everybody's, every student who's using it gets the exact same advertisement, that's not targeted advertising. Targeted advertising is where they're using the student data that they're collecting in order to say, oh, hey, Johnny likes the color blue. We're only going to advertise for things that are blue for him. Those are the kinds of things that we need to avoid. Those are against this new law. Just kind of be aware that that can happen, that there have been examples of that in the past. Be aware that your students own their data, and their parents, until the students are of the age of adulthood, own their data. And if they ask you for it, you have to, in a timely manner, give that to them. A lot of us, we have that already available through the different programs that we use to keep and track information, such as grading. But there are certain examples, I think in our case at our district, we do benchmarks that they don't have online access. They can't just log in and see that information. Where if they were to ask for that, we need to give that to them in a timely manner. It doesn't mean we need to change the data at all or present it in a form that is pleasing to the person asking for it. It just means we have to provide it to the individual because they do own that data. Our student data disclosure statement. This is the one that we have to provide to parents. It's actually pretty huge. And it's not going to just be a single page or a single paragraph. This is telling the parents, hey, we're collecting all of this data. Here's exactly what it is. Here's where it is stored. Here are the third parties who have it. Here's how they're using it. Here's what they're doing to protect the data. Here's what we're doing to protect the data. And it's kind of this all-encompassing, letting parents know exactly what we're doing with the data. And it's going to be pretty extensive. I think probably the biggest piece that we're working on right now is this student data disclosure statement. It has to be available on your website. And it has to be something where they can click. It's a standalone document. And while it is created by the LEA, the teachers still are responsible for reading and understanding this information. Okay, disclosure of data breach. All of us probably have in place something already that says, hey, here's what we do in case of a data breach. If you don't, you need to. You need to let everyone know, hey, something happened with your students' data, and you need to have a plan in place where this is exactly what we're going to do if X happens or if Y happens. If a nurse loses a laptop that has student information on it, what are we going to do? Who do we report to first? Who do they report to? most of the data breaches come when either someone hacks into your system, or in the case of teachers, it's usually they're victims of phishing. They lose the laptop. They don't put your data on a portable device ever. Those get lost very easily, and that is considered a data breach. Third-party contractors.
I got a question for you on
Okay.
that. Would it be considered a data breach if the hard drive is encrypted? And the policy for security says that for a district that anybody that has PII data on a computer have it encrypted, because if it's encrypted, the person wouldn't be able to have access to it.
Could you type that? And then Whitney will probably answer that one.
I'm afraid we couldn't hear your question very
Yeah.
well, so
I didn't know.
I heard about part of it.
Yeah,
I
I
didn't know
heard
that
half
they
of it.
could talk back to us. Too.
Well, if your mic is on, you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, the audio's not great. If you could, write your question in the chat. I'll let you know. I don't see anything yet. Want me to interrupt you
Sure.
when it goes? Okay. Oh, here he is.
See, Anthony, great answer.
Oh, he answered it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks, Anthony.
Yeah. Anthony Muto is our expert on data security at our district, at Jordan School District. So I think his answer is probably a good one that I would sign into. And that brings up another point, and that is to ensure that all of the data that you have on your computer, that your computer is encrypted. It's not enough just to have the password. And that's something that was brought up at our meeting with the folks that came down from DC, is ensuring that you have done everything you can to protect the data in case something like that is lost. Did that answer it? Okay. Did I skip ahead? Okay. With the third-party contractors, they're not educational entities. And they are contracted, and you're paying them money to collect data in some respect. And I'll give you an example. Skyward is probably one of the more common ones that's used across the state. But we're paying them to collect all of this information and all of this data. However, they are not a member of the school district. This does not include your yearbook people, your photography people, all of these individuals that are collecting directory-only information. They are not producing any kind of a score. They're not doing any kind of an academic activity. That doesn't count as a third-party contractor. Those are not people where you have to look at their terms of agreement as far as like how long are they going to keep the photograph. Doesn't matter. However, if you have anyone who, once you give them student information that starts out as directory information, and they do something academic for you with that information, and in our case it would be like Mastery Connect, they're now storing student scores. That's connected with personally identifiable information. That's where we get the idea of a third-party contractor. They cannot use it for anything outside of what is in their contract, and this is where we have to be really careful about reading our terms of agreement. Some of them, not anymore so much, but I'll give an example of Google Apps for Education. There was a time when they said, I own this data as your company, and I can do whatever I want with it because I'm providing this service for you, and part of my contract is that I'm using this. And they had a lawsuit in California, and they ended up changing their policy and saying all of the data belongs to the student. You want to make sure that as you're looking through contracts that this is the case. We'll go over that in more detail later. But this is who the third-party contractors are. And if you ask them and say, hey, I want you to submit to an audit, they have to. And if you say, I want all of my data back right, not right now, but in a timely manner, I want everything, then they have to give that to you. They can't claim any kind of an ownership. And I've seen cases of this where they'll tell you, no, we only give a certain amount of data back to the educational entity, and you have the right to say, no, you have to give it all back to me. The responsibilities of the state, auditing and supporting the LEA vetted process, and then providing the legal guidance for student data. That's what they're going to be doing. At the LEA level, we're going to be the ones who are actually vetting the third-party contractors. And so we're the ones that are responsible, even if we get help from the state, even if Whitney's people come in and say, hey, we're going to help you out and maybe vet some of these apps that are used across the state, it is still ultimately the responsibility of the LEA to make sure that every app that's used in the district is vetted. And that includes being aware of what your teachers are doing. So,
Thank you.
Did you have something to add on that?
No, that's
Okay.
exactly. I like to hear that from an LEA.
From an LEA.
Yes.
We are aware it is our responsibility. Your teachers are responsible for deciding whether or not an app needs to be vetted, and we're going to give some information on that in a moment. And they're also responsible for following the legal guidances. But the district needs to train. And I'm not going to... Oh, does someone have a question? Okay. The district is responsible for training on that and for providing that training yearly to every single person in the district who utilizes data. This does not mean your custodian, because your custodian is not going to utilize data. That came up in a meeting, and no, they don't. But even if you have a volunteer who has any kind of computer access to these students' scores, and they're just, I'm just helping out. If they're helping out, they need to know what the law is, and they need training.
And there's a great new resource on PTAC's website, a brochure and also a short video for volunteers. So it's not very timely. You don't have to produce it yourself. Just make sure that happens.
And now we are handing this over to Brooke.
Okay.
When do you need to vet these apps?
So thank you, Holly, for going over what responsibilities a district has or LEA has toward vetting educational applications. And of course, the biggest challenge that we face, the opportunity that we face, is ensuring that teachers understand what their responsibility is in looking at the terms of service and privacy policies of the apps they choose to use on their own. So let's look at a couple of apps that teachers might be using in classrooms in your district. First of all, let's look at Twidla. Is this an app that would need to be vetted according to the information Holly just gave us? So this app is an interactive whiteboard. I can go to the website. I can have all of my students join in. They can join in groups, and they can collaborate and draw and write and solve problems all together on a collaborative whiteboard. There's no usernames, and there's no logins, and there's no saved data. So would this be an app that I would need to vet as a teacher? Would I need to look at the terms of service? Think about it.
Let's see.
And the answer is no. This isn't collecting PII, because remember, PII is that personally identifiable information where I could go back and see who did what later. In Twidla, I can't. So no vetting required. What about keyboarding online? If I were using keyboarding online, my students would need an account. They'd have a username and a password, and there would be a cookie created at every session when they logged in. But the cookie would be deleted at the end of the session. So, would I need to vet this app as a teacher? And the answer is yes, because that combination of username and password is enough to constitute PII, personally identifiable information. So I would need to check the privacy policy for this app, even though it wasn't saving the cookies from session to session. What about Nearpod? A lot of teachers love Nearpod. It has a username, but no password. Students are just given a code to join the class. And they have a device identifier. They can join from their mobile device. So Nearpod is tracking their username, whatever they choose as their username, and their device identifier. Is that an app that needs to be vetted? It is, because that combination of a user identifier and a device identifier is enough to constitute PII. Okay, let's look at Edpuzzle. So, and Edpuzzle is a great resource, but it does require a unique username for each student, a password, and their name and a unique class code. But everything that the student enters can be deleted upon request. We have a very good policy for that. So would you need to vet this app in the classroom? Yeah. You're nodding over here. Yes, you would. Because again, that combination of a username and a password creates a situation where the app is using PII, personally identifiable information, and it needs to be vetted. Basically, any time the app can remember who is who, it needs to be vetted by the teacher. And this is a great opportunity because the more tech we are using in our classroom, the more data we have, the more we can drive our instruction from that data. But that opportunity also does create the responsibility to make sure that the company who's providing the data is using the data appropriately and storing it appropriately and keeping it secure. And I think we'll find that as more ed tech companies start up and become popular and become useful to teachers, that we'll find the companies that really hang on and are really the best to work with are the ones that are taking privacy the most seriously. Which is a great kind of thing to remind teachers that they feel overwhelmed by this process of vetting apps. There are a lot of apps out there. So if there's one app that you're using that doesn't meet the standards that we've set forth or that are set forth by your LEA, there's probably another app out there that will meet your needs. So the way you can remember it is go, slow, or stop. As a teacher, go and use the app if the app does not collect PII, or if the app is contracted by your state or district or school and provided for you. You don't have to worry about those terms of service. Go ahead and use it. Slow down and check the terms of service and privacy policy if you can see the app is collecting PII. In other words, if the app will remember who's who later. Stop and don't proceed using this app unless you get permission if the app is collecting authorization only data, that biometric data that Holly was talking about, or the optional data. In that case, you'll need to get some parent signatures on a data disclosure form. Possibly also you'll need to get some other people at your LEA involved in checking the app's terms of service. So, what are some smart privacy choices? When you're looking at the privacy policy for these apps, what kinds of things need to stand out? First, again, make sure you can always recognize when an app is using PII. Does it remember who's who? Anytime there's a student user account involved, even if it's just a username plus a class ID, that's requiring PII. If the student data is saved across sessions, you can log back in and see what the student did, then clearly the data was saved according to a personal identifier somehow. So if you recognize that PII is being used, review the privacy policy. And the nice thing is, terms of service and privacy policies are usually separate on the app's website, and the privacy policy is a lot shorter. So it might take you 3-4 minutes to look over this. And a couple of other just tips is to limit the amount of personal information collected. If you're using an app in a classroom, or all the apps that we've signed up for personally, you've probably noticed that it asks for more information than it really needs in the sign-up page. So if you can tell your students to only enter the fields that absolutely have to be entered in order to sign up for an account, that would save you some headache as well. So that's one of the things that you should look for in the privacy policy as you're looking through what the app is doing with your data. It should state clearly that the app is only using the data for running the application itself. It's only collecting data as needed. And the other thing that a company should make clear in their privacy policy is where the data goes. Pretty much every app you're going to be using in your classroom is using a third-party affiliate for data storage or analytics or security. They all have to have third-party contractors of their own. And so they should tell you about that up front and give you a chance to know where that data is going and who their third-party contractors are. ClassDojo does a great job of this in their privacy policy, that you can click and see the list of all the third parties that are used for managing services on their end. And basically all the third parties that would be working with student data. Make sure the privacy policy also protects the student data from being sold or rented. And it should say that very clearly. It's actually not that common now to find an educational app that's trying to sell or rent student data because there's been such backlash against that. But it should definitely still say that they won't do it. So Nearpod has a great example from their privacy policy. It says, we do not sell or rent such information. So we're looking for a phrase like that in every privacy policy of educational apps that we use. Also, the app should ensure that there's a way to delete educational data because parents can request that data be deleted. So if the student moves, or even at the end of the year, they should have some process in place for cleaning out the student data once it's no longer needed, because again, the educational app should only be using student data as it's needed to run the app. Once the student moves on, it's not needed by that app anymore. So you should look for a phrase like this, like ClassFlow has in their privacy policy. We will delete or de-identify student personal information when it is no longer needed or at the direction or request of a school. As Holly mentioned, you should also avoid targeted ads. And you can tell which ads are targeted. If you're looking at the ad in the upper right corner, you'll see this little symbol, that triangle with the eye. And when you see that, you know that ad is being shown to you as a consumer because the website has been tracking your online behavior. And they're serving up an ad to you that is more relevant to you as a consumer. That's great for us as adult consumers, but we do not like to see that with a student's educational applications because we don't want them tracked at all while they're online. So the behavior tracking inside the app for personal learning, though, is okay. So I do want to make that distinction. If they're tracking students' behavior to serve up content for that student, that's great. And even an ad inside an app is not bad news. Ads are okay as long as the ads aren't being served up based on the student's behavior online. Does that make sense? So one of the sites that maybe be on the lookout for is TeacherTube. I was looking at this, and their privacy policy states that they will show advertisements based on the number of times you viewed an ad, but not any personally identifiable information to determine which ads to deliver to you. So that's a phrase that might give me pause because they claim they're not using PII, but they are using my online behavior to serve up ads, which might cross the line in terms of student data privacy. Also, make sure that there is a way to give parents access to this data. So if I am using Nearpod in my class and a parent wants a copy of whatever the student has done in Nearpod, I would need to find a way to provide the parent that information. And it doesn't have to be an account. It could be a download, a link, or just a paper copy. News ELA does a great job of this. In their privacy policy, it states that a parent or you as the teacher can request the deletion of or place certain restrictions on the collection, use, and disclosure of your child's information. So any privacy policy that explicitly gives a nod to parents' ownership and access to data is a great thing. Also, check for secure login. The moment we're logging into an app is the moment where we're transmitting that secure data, our name, our password. And that should be secure. So you should see this little icon in your web address bar with the lock and the HTTPS, because that lets you know that your login page is securing your information. And if you don't see that on the login page, take the opportunity to ask the app company to please provide a secure login, because they can do it. 6 months ago, Noodle Tools, which is a great quiz builder, they did not have a secure login on their page, as you can see. And then today they do, because people contacted them and asked them to do that. One thing that the privacy policy should state explicitly is that the privacy policy doesn't change if the company is sold. Companies, especially ed tech companies, get sold all the time and acquired. So the privacy policy should make it clear that any changes to the policy or any sale of the company, you will be notified and you will have an opportunity to review those changes. So Animoto does a great job of this. Their privacy policy states that you will be notified via email and a prominent notice on our website of any change in ownership or in uses of your personal information. That's the kind of thing we like to see. And you can expect consistent protection if a company is sold or acquired. You should expect that the company would keep those same terms, those same privacy terms for the student data, like in BrainRush. Their privacy policy states, we will require the acquiring organization to agree to protect the privacy of your personally identifiable information in a manner consistent with the existing policy. That's a great thing to see in a privacy policy. So let's go back and look at a few more apps. And now that you've heard a little bit more about it, try and think through, would this app need to be vetted at the district level? Scratch Junior. So if I'm using Scratch Junior, I'm on a mobile device, and it's keeping track of my click data and my device location. So the device will know, or the app will know, that I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah, and it will keep track of my click data as I go through the game or the activity. But there's no usernames and no accounts. Would this app need to be vetted?
Let's have them answer. They're not
Yes.
answering on the notes. Let's wait. We're waiting.
I'll use my good teacher wait time.
That's right. Let's see if they... Usually Anthony from Jordan will speak up.
Does this need to be vetted? Yes or no?
He's taking this course before that.
This one's kind of a puzzler. Well,
With a long wait time.
yeah, I think we've done our wait time. So, Scratch Junior would not need to be vetted at the district level because it is not requiring any PII. Though it does have a device identifier, it is not identifying the student. So you can't go back and view the student's work later. It doesn't remember who's who. So that's the cue that we wouldn't need to go and vet Scratch Junior. What about Plickers, though? A lot of teachers love Plickers. Students actually don't have a mobile device. They have a card with a graphic on it, and the teacher uses their mobile device or their phone to take a picture of the class, and all the information is recorded from the card and stored online. So the data is being saved to the student's account, and the student is uniquely identified on their card. Would this require vetting by the LEA? Wait time?
We can try wait time.
Okay.
Yes, the student is uniquely identified.
Oh, you got it. You've been paying attention. The student is uniquely identified, and you can see who did what, who answered what. Their data is saved. All of that says this is PII, and it's being saved across sessions, so we definitely need to vet this app. What about Kahoot? Kahoot is so fun to play with students. And it's pretty easy to do. Students use a PIN to access the game. There's no account set up for the student. The student logs in with an alias. And it does use cookies to track the player. So you do have the device identifier and the student alias. Does this need to be vetted? Do you have any guesses so far?
They're scared.
They're scared.
We're terrifying.
All right.
It's public. Oh, here we go. Yes.
Yeah. It
Yes,
does.
it's
Good
the-
job.
it's the-
Yes.
Mhm.
Even though the student is not setting up their own account, the app remembers who's who. So you would still need to vet this app's privacy policy. And looking through the privacy policy, I'll give you a heads up. One of the current requests for Kahoot is that they improve their system to where you can delete students' data, because right now there's a lot of people requesting the ability to do that. But right now they can, and that's kind of speaks to the point that a lot of these companies are young and they need feedback from us in order to know what features to add to their app and what we expect from them. So feel free to contact companies. They love that kind of feedback and ask for what you want. And that concludes our tips on how to check privacy policies for apps and how to vet them and how to know when that level of vetting is required. There's some more sources that you can look at for further information and information that you can pass out to teachers. A great source of information is the Educator's Guide to Student Privacy that was put together by Connect Safely and the Future of Privacy Forum. You can find that online by just typing in Educator's Guide to Student Data Privacy. It's pretty well known. Also, if you look at Common Sense Education Privacy Evaluations, there's a lot of apps that they've gone through and double-checked, is it a secure login? How are they storing the data? What are the terms of service? What's their privacy policy? So if you want a kind of a quick method of checking the privacy policies and vetting an app, go ahead and check out Common Sense Media and their privacy evaluations. Future Privacy Forum has excellent information, not just about student data privacy, but about all data privacy. So if you want to learn more in general, this would be a great place to stop. FERPA Sherpa is my favorite resource because it's fun to say. It's got great information on student data privacy, not just for parents and teachers, but for school officials, pretty much everyone at every level. Connect Safely is a similar resource where they have information for schools and school districts about student data privacy. And I Keep Safe as well. So there's a lot of people out there who can help give you information and resources. So hopefully that makes this whole process seem less overwhelming. And of course, we have the Privacy Technical Assistance Center from the U.S. Department of Education, which, as Whitney mentioned, has given us some new resources that we can use. All right. Thank you very much for participating in this, and just remember to go slow or stop when using PII.
Okay,
All right.
well, thank you. Thank you for everyone for coming. Again, we'll have resources available shortly. We will post these slides. I believe it was recorded as well. But I think we'll get maybe requests to maybe do this for teachers at some point in time. So have a lovely day. Thank you for being patient.
Yeah.
Aloha.